Hey everybody, hope everybody had a good lunch and is enjoying themselves. I'm excited about our next panel, not only because this group of artists continues to shape the legacy of collage through their practices, but because they call our beautiful city home. Each artist on this panel is an educator as well as a practicing artist with a different array of skill sets. First we have Shawn Theodore, who's been a professor at University of the Arts, a gallery director, and a widely celebrated photographer. Shawn currently has a show up at one of our finest galleries in the city, Paradigm Gallery, not too far from here. Also, we have Yannick Lowery, who originally is hailing from the Big Apple and is joining us as an educator from the Da Vinci Art Alliance as well as Fleischer Art Memorial. His work was recently used in editorials for Vanity Fair. His show this past year, Addressing the Future, has offered a thoughtful and collectively introspective reimagination of Philadelphia's shifting landscape. And last but not least, we have Jillian M. Rock. Jillian has been a printmaker and an educator for years and has had her hand on the pulse of many art communities in this city, including Da Vinci, Fleischer, the Cherry Street Pier Studios, and was a fellow with Mural Arts Fellowship for Black Artists. Most recently, her work was shown at the Bishop Gallery in Brooklyn as part of a larger collaboration with Columbia University. Please give it up for this incredibly talented local panel.
Back at y'all.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. So thank you all. Thank you, Jake, for that intro. It was lovely. We're gonna do a basic artist talk. So I'm gonna ask the artists who they are, tell me a little bit about what I have up on the screen, and then we're gonna have a collective conversation. I'll leave some time in the end for you to ask questions, but as always, those are best when you have them more naturally when we're mingling afterwards, just to also honor that there's someone else after us. Again, I'm Jillian, this is Shawn, this is Yannick. We're here to talk about our process, color, form, legacy. Archival Blues was kind of given to us based off of a conversation that we just were lamenting over the color blue. You'll know why later on. And I thought it was best fitting. And I also want to thank Yannick for this photograph that I used for the first slide. So I'm Jillian Rock. I'm actually a multidisciplinary artist. I'm a trauma-informed teaching artist. And I work primarily in collage, screen printing, and risograph. This is one of my pieces of water. I have a sister piece of land where I am investigating those two things within the hair of the Black women that are in the photograph. My work tends to take the style of a totem pole with a lot of negative and white space around it because my work is investigating the white space quite literally in life and also in my work. So you will see my work, even the pieces that are downstairs, they take a totem pole style. All right. To the meat of the talk. So what I'm gonna do is just have you introduce yourself, say a little bit about yourself, but I picked two pieces for each of you, one for each of you that you gave. I know it's a weird kind of turnaround, but I just want you to speak to the piece that I have up because I figured this will get that part out the way and then we can just have our natural conversation. So Yannick, you go first.
Sure. Is this thing on?
I think so.
Everybody hear me? First, let me just thank everybody for coming out. This is impressive. Always good to see people engaged in this medium in this way. My name is Yannick Lowery. I'm a visual artist. I do have an interdisciplinary practice, but I think most people know my main focus is collage. I assume that collage is really just about everything, but I was actually trained as a sculptor and a painter. Collage kind of came about as, I don't know, I just had a lot of time and excess and access to material. And I think some of the most beautiful things come out of those, requirements of just having like the time and space to arrange. And I think this piece here kind of speaks to that. This is called Atlas. This is 2022, maybe 2023. But I really try to illustrate a lot of the tension between issues that are kind of right in front of us, right in the pages that we pass through every day. So that's why I think collage is so interesting because we're all dealing with this same material. But when we can kind of recontextualize it in different spaces and put it in a different format, you get a whole different breadth of understanding. So I was really trying to discuss the gap between, well, during the Middle Passage. This is actually the mountain range that lives between Ghana and the US, specifically, West Africa. And thinking about that gap and how we kind of fill that space and how much we hold in that passage between us. I mean, there's a lot to it, and a lot of these themes are throughout a lot of my work, but I think this one was one that was a bit more literal in the way that I was trying to communicate that space between those spaces as far as our experience. There's even a little note of Philadelphia by the hand on the left, you know, pointing to like, this is where we landed, this is where I'm at now, this is speaking to that journey. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Beautiful. All right. And you can just introduce yourself and just speak a little bit more about the piece that I picked.
I didn't know you were using this one. That's cool. I'm Shawn Theodore.
Beautiful.
A lot of folks know me first as a photographer. I got into photography as a way of escaping painting, but then that led me to a desire to want to make collage. And the reason I started making collage is a few really interesting reasons. One, my first time ever showing a collage, it was at the Lucian Crump Gallery, way back in the day, if anybody knows Lucian Crump, it's a very old gallery. But I had used someone else's work to, you know, if it's a photo. And it ended up being a bit of a contentious moment because the gentleman was like, you know, I really don't want you using my stuff, you know. And it made me realize that my skill for photography and my desire to make photos and make images could lend itself to creating other images and making more images that live within me or lived in my heart. But I also have to stop for a hot second and give credit to John Abner, right back there, who helped me. Yeah, that's John. That's an amazing collage artist unto his own right. All right, John showed me a piece that he did, and I'm never going to forget. It was about 6 or 8 by 6 maybe, and it was incredible, and it set me off on a journey that I could not let go of. And you know, I love to be able to talk about the people who have given me this roadmap. So John Abner is one of the people in my life that, without him, I don't know if I would have wanted to take this step forward into creating collage. Then it was discovering in a single page of a gigantic art history book, one Romare beard in peace. And for all of his, you know, all of his remarkable works, that there was only one page, I had to go and discover other things and find out his language and his rich practice. But I like to make work that speaks to my sense of spirituality. I listen to my ancestral voices around me. For the most part, I don't make work unless it connects to my sense of spirit. And this piece is called Aquavius. It's a character that it's an amalgamation of 3 of my cousins. And he's a fictional character, but I feel like he lives with me every single day, because I've been making these characters over and over and over again in different forms, digital painting, collage, and there's this family that I've been building and allowing it to live, you know, with the other works and the conceptual works. But it's, you know, a collage like this is as real to me as a portrait that I would make of anyone in this room. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, so kind of piggybacking off of what we're inspired by, I know a large part of our conversation is about collage and form. Yes, the slides are really nice. And I'm interested in at your entry point, not necessarily with color, but with form. And I'll explain more. So when you're thinking of your collage and you're thinking of like setting it up, does form start for you when you see an image, or does form start for you when you start to cut? Whether it's analog or whether it's digital, are you looking at images or anything with the intention of the form, or does that come later? Are you just gathering? A lot of times I'm gathering things and I'm very specific about not always altering a form of an image. I'll tear a little bit, but I won't change the edges a lot. But I know specifically Yannick in this piece, it's up next, form is like heavily there because it's a series, right? And so I'm just interested in, at what point does form start for you? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. With this series specifically, it was very organic. This started off with tears, and then following whatever gesture that tear made with scissors. So kind of tracing what the tear kind of laid out as a map, and then that created these shapes really, really kind of out of nowhere. The figures were then added, of course, just to kind of give it a little bit of base and place it somewhere. But the bulk of these organic image, like these shapes around here, those aren't planned or anything like that. I like to let the nature of the thing kind of show what it can do. And with paper, I mean, there's so much variance in it, in the way that you handle it. And I think watching what that can do, you know, is the fun. You know, it's a surprise of it. I think there is a bit of planning, but, you know, skip the plan.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you'll start off with an idea and then just let it kind of evolve. At least that's how I like to approach it. I don't like to stay too rigid in one way of doing things. When I'm teaching, I always say, yeah, I'm teaching this, but you can ignore everything that I'm saying. And I hope that people can kind of always just find their own path. And that's what I try to do with each piece that I do. Honestly, I don't even like looking at older work because I feel like I'll reference it. When I do a series like this, it's usually done in one day because I just get it out and then it's just like, okay, on to the next method or the next approach. It's very, you know, I follow my intuition. And I think that's really important with any work, you know, if it's going to be lasting and meaningful in a way that can resonate with people who are interested.
Shawn, I'm interested in the digital landscape, how you approach form in that space, because are you juxtaposing like tangible pieces into the digital landscape and then manipulating it there, or is it all starting there? And then how does form take off in that space?
Well, I'd like to start with a photo. You know, I find weird things happening in photos a lot, and I want to pull it out and extrapolate it. It may require me to do things to it that I see here and push it a little further. Like we have our differences of changing shape. I will change the shape in a moment because I think there's some dynamic movement in there. I want to unlock that.
Absolutely.
And I'll have shapes and moments and things that are occurring in photos that are unrelated for the most part. And eventually I'll collect them together and see if there's something speaking to me in that. I like to allow for the things to occur naturally, even though it's digital. And even though this is an image that is probably a digital image or a film-based image, it doesn't matter where it comes from. I'm looking in the image for other things to come out as well. And you know, when you discover something, you have to rest with it for a while because it may not give you what it is that you initially think could come from it. Like, you know, Aquavius's scarf was rose petals, a photo of rose petals.
Okay.
You know, but those are the rose petals from my mom's yard. So then there's the conversation with my mom, like, hey, you know, what do you think? And how can I do more with it? And that's where I like to have a collaborative conversation back to the source, you know, and this sort of hair like happening here was just a picture that I took when I was driving out one day, and it was the lights streaking by.
Okay.
And I just let a couple of slow shutter shots happen, but I ended up loving it because it felt like fur, you know? So my reality and then placing it here is giving you a suggestion of what it should be, but you know, you won't know that it was just light.
Right.
You know, it was just light. And then, you know, I have some fake cuts and real cuts, and I like playing with the idea of what a cut actually is. You know, because you know, when you lean your razor one way or the other, you're going to get one thing or another. Yeah.
Yesterday, Yuval had a talk where he spoke about collage influencing sculpture, but I'm very interested in, Yannick, how sculpture has influenced your collage.
Oh yeah, I mean, I look at these as structures. They're two-dimensional, but I'm building in a way that I would, out of wood or out of glass or anything that I could find. It just so happens that it's paper.
Right.
So a lot of times it's not, even just this, it's like tucking, it's like folding, it's a lot of, wrapping around. There's some magic happening here,
right.
just like structurally here that
yes.
you might miss just because it kind of looks like layers. But yeah, sculpture I think is, that's my root as far as how I think about assembling things. It's definitely more about building rather than layering so much. And I think, all of these mediums have so many elements that influence each other. But with collage, there's always this one result at the end, and it's usually on a piece of paper. It's usually flat. But when you're looking at it, you can kind of feel that labor that happened, that building that has happened. I mean, at least that's what I'm hoping for.
Right.
That you can feel that this has been something constructed very meticulously, even if it looks accidental. But it has almost like a blueprint to it, that I kind of just adjust as needed, whatever the plan is. Yes. But yeah, these, as I'm remembering now, this was actually cut from images of clouds. So I would tear the white cloud out, and this was just the blue sky left.
Okay.
And then tracing that image, or tracing that edge with the scissor, would create that kind of glow on the edge like that. And I'm looking for like almost mistakes like that, like the leftover,
right.
like the remaining or the forgotten pieces. In any of the workshops that I do, I never toss out anything because people cut out stuff. No. And I'm like, let me use that. Like I go back through the scraps all the time. Thank you all so much.
Yannick has the best scraps.
Well, that's where you find like the stuff that people, are not looking
Absolutely.
at, and use it.
When we were talking, Shawn said one of the most beautiful things ever. We were talking about your influence in photography, and you were specifically saying like all your life you wanted to do collage, and that your photography has been a buildup of that. You have this like stock of images of your own, and I just want you to speak to that more, like personally. You gave me so much to work from, like in terms of just like access to your pieces, that I was really trying to just pull, like what is one thing I can pull, but they caught my eye, every single piece, both of what you gave me for so many reasons. But I picked this piece because I loved the play on color, and I also just loved this juxtaposition of dark and light, and then there's things in there that I see, right? As a black person, I see quilts, and I see beautiful hair, and I see beautiful skin, but I would like you to speak more about, what you mentioned to us about you, like taking these photographs. Obviously, you're an amazing photographer and photographer, and that's why you're taking your photographs. But the intention to have a body of work to then develop a deeper body of work in the form of collage.
Yeah. For me, it's I like to think I'm filling a blank, and that blank is that space spiritually for African Americans. I call it Afro mythology. We don't necessarily have our own mythology. We borrow and take from our colonizers what we need. But when I started to consider that there wasn't anything that was immediately just ours, and when I say just ours, I mean African Americans. We borrow even from West African spirituality and mythology. So I wanted to make a visual sort of language, a vernacular that could be a foundation for that. So in this piece, there's a lot happening here because everything is of some level of handmade construction. So the dresses, I designed the dresses, the floral pattern on the dresses, then I had a seamstress make the dresses. The quilt was an actual old quilt from around Gee's Bend. This is a tree that, the stump that was recovered from off of a plantation in South Carolina. this Foot Locker was a Foot Locker that belonged in, it was in Germantown in a house that was connected to the Underground Railroad.
Okay.
The tambourine is an old tambourine from a Baptist church down south, and I also found that it was interesting to have a bird cage because I wanted to reference, why the caged bird sings, of course, But even the presentation of the women in the blackest possible way, like they're painted. They are physically painted. Myself and a makeup artist, we spent about 4 hours doing each woman. And it's a labor of love. And then the hair itself is another labor of love. So you're talking about 6 months of planning to put together a project, which then the necklaces aren't anything to sneeze at either, because that's Bulgari necklaces. So Bulgari asked me to shoot some of their work, and I said, sure, I'm interested in doing commercial work, but it has to fit with what I'm talking about. Because my stories aren't referenced in your marketing. When are you going to ever talk to me and my people? So if you want me to do this work, and I'm glad to take the paycheck, but it's going to have to be in my vision. It's going to have to fit with what I see this kind of jewelry would work for. And, it feels good to make things that we've never seen, but we've always dreamt of.
Absolutely.
But there's this weird moment when you're making it that you're living in that dream too, and you realize how much more you should be doing and can be doing. And I like to give credit. First of all, I gotta give you credit. So that piece that was on before, the work that you had, I was just telling him that I was looking in an inspiration folder that I have. And I got about 15 of these folders that I saved in my computer. And that piece was in my inspiration folder.
Was it the Atlas one?
Yeah. No, go back. This one, horn. And it's in there, and I just told him that when I was like, man, you've been in my inspiration folder. But collage and the spirit, like this piece lives in Aquavius, and this piece lives in my salon piece. Like what we do and how we do it is also collage of practice. I wish I knew him then, but I'm glad I know him now because I get to tell him this, and we'll be able to make work that makes sense to our practices later. We'll be in conversation in our work at some point.
Absolutely.
But to do work like this for me this is a collage as well. Even the painting in the back, the backdrop is one big collage, because it's torn pieces of paper and some paint. And, we decided, that's like, how do you make it make sense for what would be in this background of this salon? Like what in this spiritual moment, motion and chaos and, some level of control. So, piecing things together in photos for me is still collage,
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Okay, so the larger conversation, legacy in the archives. I feel like we can kind of talk about this for a very long time, but I think in our conversation, color got us to this point, specifically the color blue got us to talking about legacy and the archive and just how our work is archived and the importance of color in our work. I know Yannick is obsessed with color and pigments and glitter. I've taken one of Yannick's classes, and so I've had the experience of things that are important to you. But I'm curious, in what ways do you want the investigation of color, even if it's other than blue, or specifically the color blue, and all the connotations and history that comes with that for us as Black people, to live in your work in the way that it's archived? Because as much as we have a say in our legacy, we really kind of don't, right? Because it lives in the world absent of us when we're gone. That's the legacy, right? We hope our kids are doing well and they're carrying on what we want them to. We hope our work is being received how we want. But if you have a say of your legacy, or if you have a say in how it's viewed, I'm curious in the ways that it's informed by all that came before us, because that's where blue got us to this. We were talking about blue and the meaning of it for African Americans, and I'm just wanting us to have a larger conversation around that.
For sure.
Yeah. So anyone can take that.
Well, I'll jump. Blue for me, it was interesting when we got into this conversation because It started out with I don't know if I asked her, I was like, how many times have you seen a black person in a cyanotype, an old cyanotype? And I think that question opened up the idea of what is access and who has access to being present within a historical moment. And when I think about historical moments, a lot of times the historical moments are absent of our power being used in ways that is to our own benefit. You know, the indigo trade before the cotton trade was the biggest moneymaker in colonial times, and I often think about what would have happened if indigo would have remained this particular economic vehicle. But you know, being as though you have cheap labor forces and all, the prices can come down. Even today, I was telling Yannick that I wore my Brooks Brother sweater because of its connection to African American history. We know the term Sunday's finest as a thing. Well, slave owners would go and dress their finest slaves on Sunday in Brooks Brothers clothes to go to church. So I wear this with that history in mind. And I think about how much of this history that we don't know, but people like us like to infuse our work with these subtle clues. My bigger problem, or my bigger question, is how many of those clues actually resonate, right? Because we could be shouting into the void, and it's very, wax is poetic, and it sounds great, and we look esteemed and all that old good stuff, but is it really making a difference for what our futures are about, And I wonder if what we do in our art, or if what we do in our explanation of its importance makes much of a difference. And in that to me is the blues. Because when you just sit there humming and strumming and humming and strumming, and everybody's tapping their foot and they're like, man, that sounds good, but it doesn't stick with you. It's just any old song. And then we had to carry the weight of all that into our next act. So that's what I think about when I think about art and the blues.
Wow, that was,
I know.
No, I mean, I'll just jump on the end of that. I mean, that resonated so deeply with me, thinking about that in a way like, okay, is this translating?
Dig it.
Is what I'm putting down getting picked up? At a certain point, it's like, I don't even consider it. And I think there is a sadness to that is just everlasting. Like, am I really being understood? Is this really, is every reference that I've tried to pull from being even, seen, or are they just seeing a pretty picture?
Right.
And I think there's a part of that is just inherent in anything that you make. Once you make it, you let it go, and it has a life of its own, and people can run with it all around it and avoid everything that you tried to say, which happens a lot, which is also okay, but it is a bit sad. But when thinking about color and, as far as like legacy, we're trying to pull in so many of these references from our lives, from our personal experiences, from our histories, our collective histories, personal. And it's like, there's no way that everybody's gonna get it. Right. And I don't want everybody to get it. There's something about Black privacy that I'm really trying to nail on its head. I'm speaking to not just every Black person even, you know what I mean? I think I'm speaking to a specific frequency that I don't want everybody to have. I think everybody can pull something from it, but I don't have any expectations about who I want to just be like, yes, this is exactly what you meant. I'm unique. I think everybody is. Everybody has their own, identity, has their own specific set of laws that they live by, and that all gets implemented into the work that I make. So if it fit everybody, I would be upset. It would make me feel like maybe I'm not being true to myself.
Right.
So I think when you're talking about legacy, archive, we're talking about something that lasts. I really want to make sure that I made a mark here that was true to myself, and that's it. That's as far as I go, as far as trying to share something. I'm not it's not for everybody. I'm not for everybody.
Right.
Let me piggyback on that. I've been saying this for a couple months now, that my audience has not yet been born.
Yes, he said.
You know,
He
remember
said
I
that.
was,
I do.
Yeah.
and the thing is, it frees you from a lot of desire to make things make sense right now, if you know that you'll never have physical contact with
Right.
these folks that will eventually discover all your secrets, you know, and be able to figure it out and, you know, understand what it was about. I think in this contemporary space, it's good for us to have this sort of side-winding room to make ourselves present and almost be like a photon.
Right.
You know, we are here and we are there and nowhere all at the same time. You know, I think that's what it's like these days to be concerned with archive, because we are literally creating archive every time we make work.
Right.
There's a physical, then there's the cloud-based, you know, the things that you think are deleted will always be there somehow. There's a space where all this stuff is there. So, you know, I don't worry as much about it either. I think it's going to be interesting to see what all of these various archives, when we are gone, what it will end up looking like. And what legacy is for us now in the future is definitely not something we can conceive, you know.
In the future, in the nearest of futures, I know Yannick creates every day. I'm not an artist that creates every day. We were talking about that before everything came up. Are you starting new works? I know you have a show at the Paradigm. Or are you continuing to deepen the works that you have? So like, are you continuing more on the Horn series, or that's behind you because you did that all in one day because you're like a super person? But are you continuing on certain projects maybe in theme but not in structure? Or what does new work look like for you both?
Well, I mean, when I say I work every day, that was until a couple of months ago.
Yeah, okay.
I've been going through a move. It's been a lot of transition, and I'm still setting up my studio space. But I think the work is just like happening here, and it's happening like in the reading that I'm doing, in the sketches that I'm doing.
Right.
So as far as arranging paper or taking images, I guess that's still happening actually, but it's not. I haven't shared anything. I think what I'm thinking about now is so focused in Philadelphia's landscape. Still, I mean, and this is a project that I've been working on for like 2 years now, but it's still kind of evolving in ways that I just need to do more research on, and I consider that work.
Absolutely.
You know, I consider thinking deeply about how I want to approach this and how I can engage audiences with the work that I'm doing. So that's even during workshops. Like I'm listening to people and the conversations they're having, and how they talk about this city and how it's changed, and how I can, you know, tell those stories into something that I'm making. I mean, the last workshop that I did, someone told me that the boat by the IKEA is being turned into a reef or something.
Yes, it's finally going to, I don't know what coming out of IKEA without that is going to be.
Right, but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yes, it
But
is.
thinking about that story, now I'm thinking about, of course, like I need to make this a thing. You know what I mean? I need to make an image for that. I need to think about what else, how else can we repurpose things that are so-called staples of this city.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's a constant work, regardless if it's, you know, in the studio or not, of just trying to really find things that are genuine to inform into what I want to do next. And that's always a continuation, but everything is just like hopping off of itself, you know, and then coming from somewhere else. I mean, I'm sure today will inspire, just listening to Shawn,
Right, absolutely.
will
Same.
inspire some
For
new
both
work,
of y'all.
you know. So I'm excited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm about the continuity of work. My exhibition that's over at Paradigm is a culmination of 3 years of world building and thinking and deciding on which elements of these lives are going to be exposed first, because it's a story first that I'm considering. And I'm wondering, these fictional characters, I'm wondering in their space, well, what would they think that of me doing this? That's this sort of, you know, spiritual fourth dimensional creator peering into this three-dimensional space, then recreating it in two-dimensional space. I'm always thinking of these perceptions and perspectives that are happening within my work to continue making, and then figuring out where the story meets me, because I'm speaking of a story that's in the past.
Okay.
At what point will it coincide with my birth? So I'm writing a world,
Yes.
more or less. I'm creating a story. And it took me a while to be okay with that, because I didn't want to do that, right? But I felt I was being tasked with doing it in a very heavy, you need to do this spiritual commanding kind of way.
Yes.
Like, I kept seeing these faces and these people and these places in my dreams over and over again. So if, it shows up in your dream, it's like, all right, what are you going to do with it?
Right.
Because every artist I know, when we dream of it, it sticks with you until you get it out.
Yeah, as it should.
As it should. So I was like, man, I guess I'm going to have to do this. And it was cool for me to start this process to create this world, but base it on parts of my family life that had gone either ignored or uninvestigated for whatever reason. And getting into the histories of what's happening within my family and these dark corners that nobody wants to go into. I want to go in there because that's where the work is living at. That's where the folklore is at, and that's where all the interesting parts of family kind of happen in these corners where everyone can point to it and speculate, but what's the actual fact in there?
Right.
So in as much as I would say, my audience hasn't been born yet, I am similar in that space. Like, the actual historian of these spaces, I had not been born yet. And now that I am, and then I've sort of rebirthed myself into this artist that is this pseudo-archivist, but archivist and historian. I feel that that's a necessary place for me to continue working and just deepening the relationships, because it'll start showing itself. Like, that Aquavius is the third or fourth version of that character. And his face is becoming more and more gentle as I've connected myself to him as a main character. So I think it's important for me to keep investigating and keep creating around what's happening. I have another character, Congratulatia, who's a fun character for me, because I like to tease my girlfriend about Congratulatia all the time. I'm like, this is my digital girlfriend. Sorry, baby, sorry. But I got a piece of, I got her head and sitting on the refrigerator, and I'll go over and sing to her. I'm like, congratulations, But I'm giving life and I'm giving energy to something that I feel good about. So I want that to come through the work. And I want to see where that kind of energy that I'm giving it, which is a different kind of artistic initiative. How's that going to come out when I keep singing and serenading this digital face on my refrigerator, And the hate that my girlfriend might feel for me. I'm sorry, baby.
You're not going to get us caught up in that. How are we doing with time?
We've got about 18 minutes.
Okay, so I'm going to open up, if y'all are ready. I was going to ask a question more specifically about teaching. Did I spell everything right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm like, did I spell everything right?
Yeah, you did.
But I wanted to put this up so everyone can screen grab and just know where to see
So that's supposed to
our
be like
artists.
severe and sever.
No, but mine is existentialism.
If anyone has questions, we have time
thought
to
it
open
was,
it up. We can take a few.
Like exist.
Yes.
Anyone?
I like that.
If not, it's fine. I can keep going on. Go ahead, Jake.
I'd love to piggyback on your conversation you're having with the handles that you
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Jake.
Oh, okay. I'll let him start up.
Yeah, so severe paper. If anybody's been following me for a long time, it used to be actually called Severe Oasis. That's like way, way, way back. And I thought about that because when I first moved to Philadelphia, that's kind of what I got from this place. It had such a rich, rich texture, but it had, a lot of grit, and it was just so incredibly beautiful to me. And it seemed like this was how I could tackle this city, as far as my work was concerned. I switched it to severe paper because I started thinking more about how people were perceiving the work, my number one question would be like, is this Photoshop? Are you a digital artist? I'm not against that, but I had to make it clear that this was paper, that this was all severed paper or severe paper. And I wanted to also kind of lift up collage in a way. Like, people have this stigma against collage a little bit, like that it's more of a craft or maybe like something that isn't an elevated art form. So I said severe because I wanted you to take it seriously. Like, hey, this is serious work. I'm not like, this is not a hobby. You know, I had a chip on my shoulder about it. And I think it's kind of stuck now. And I might have outgrown it even, but I still stand by that principle of like, hey, this is severed paper, this is severe work, this is a serious approach that I'm taking here. I want you to recognize that when you come to this, you know, to this website or to this page or anytime that shows up, that, you know, I'm the real deal. Like, I'm really trying to, you know, do something in the canon of the greats before me. You know, I'm not the first to do it. I hope to be, you know, one of those. But I wanted to make sure that that recognition was there, or that intention. Yeah.
Mine is a bit of a few things. One, I come from a branding and marketing background, so I like things to be concise.
Okay.
So I was like, yeah, XST sounded right. I had a group of friends. We all were putting X's in front of our names. This was like 2010 or so. And at first I was like, you know, I wanted it to represent me, so I was like, exist, existentialism, black existentialism. And I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna rock with this because I didn't want to have existentialism or black existentialism,
Right.
but the work is black and I'm this existential kind of thinker at all times. So for me, it was just existing within my existential self. And since I was doing photography in the way that I was approaching it, sort of romantic, existential way of like placing the black figure in its ever-changing, gentrifying spaces, I thought it was a really unique way of, you know, appreciating my place in the image. So, yeah, that's what it was. And it's been that way. I never changed it. I joined Instagram in July of 2011, and I think I used my full name first, and I was like, nah, and then went straight to that.
And I'm someone who deeply uses my full name because my middle initial is my great-grandmother. Her name is Marie, and she was the first to come from the Great Migration from South Carolina and Georgia, where my family's from, to Jersey, where I was born. And so she was the first person in my family to take a train. And so when my art is being archived, I'm very particular about my middle initial being there because I want you to investigate. I want people in the future to know to wonder what the M is and to eventually find her because I think it's like really important to me. So I have a long name as it is, but I don't have anything special, but this is very special to me. I have a private page that's absent of the M, very different type of page, but for art purposes, I like my M to always be included. It's the biggest fight of my life.
Let me ask you a question about that. Do you feel as though the Great Migration has stopped or has it moved into a digital form?
I don't. I can lament about the Great Migration. My last few pieces were in regards to it. And no, I don't feel like it's stopped. I don't think that is ever going to stop.
Like, in what era do you think we are in the Great Migration? Like, what point of time are we now?
I don't think we're in a time of fear, so I don't think we're moving with trepidation anymore. I don't think we're worried about being seen. I don't think we're worried about, I think we know who we are, and I think we know what we bring. So I think we are in a reawakening of self in migration. I'm gonna just say from bottom up, if we want to be literal, past to future. You know, I was someone who was always raised that I was like superior because of who I am and where I came from. I was raised by my father, who was very, very pro-black. And so I think those lenses also have a different way in which you view the Great Migration, right? Yeah. And so I've always viewed what others may see as fear from black people as courage. to just maneuver and figure out a way. So I think we're definitely in a space where we're not hiding, we're not tiptoeing. We're kind of more in your face about how we're moving, why we're moving this way, and you can come or you can't, because like what Yannick said, it's not for everybody. But I think we're also in this like more storytelling parts of our movement in the sense that we know our stories need to be told by us, which everyone should have control of their own
we should be
story.
invested in it.
And also everyone, it would behoove us to find other ways to tell stories too, beyond just letters and words. And I'm a big letters and words person. I went to school for literature, but I think being able to tell our stories in multiple ways is where we are in that.
Yeah, I'm interested in your thought process around migration. Like that, you bring it up a lot, and it's important to you, and it is also woven into your identity. I have a piece of that because my grandfather, he changed his name somewhere along the migration, so nobody really knows who he was prior to.
Okay.
You have a greater connection to that than I do. So when I hear you talk about it, I'm very interested in that story because I'm always trying to understand the thought process of the desire and the need to make so much drastic change to survive. Right? And I don't know if it's the same for us where we are in this point in Black life, like our sense of what survival means. Because we talk about legacy a lot, but to have legacy, we need to survive. And whatever survival is dictated by the amount of life you're living. So I wonder a lot because I know you have a great grasp on that. And I wonder how going forward, that kind of information is going to change your work. And if it does, how? Like, so that was, I'm pulling the reverse card on you.
It changes my world, and I won't go too far into it because I know we may be running up on time. But I'm very, like, I can be deeply obsessed with, like, census records and documents. I'm like, I love doing that, like, beyond the ancestor.com. Like, I love census records. I'm always, after my dad passed, many of his friends I met. But it's weird to meet your parents' friends absent of them. Right. So I learned that my father was in an aviation camp while he was in middle school in Newark. I met someone who, my father, who was a Babalao, he was their godfather. I was meeting all these very impactful people that just, I started asking more questions of like my older family members on Facebook, because that's where all the older family members live. And I have a deep obsession with trains. But anytime I have something that causes any kind of discourse or I obsess about, I'm always researching it. I brought this up. I'm always researching back to the context of it within Blackness. And to understand more about my great-grandmother, and then to understand her being the first person on the train and to see pictures of her and to see how delicate she is. But I have this like deep excitement and obsession with trains. I've taken my daughters on the Amtrak train to Georgia. We've gone through the cabin experience. Like, I just really love trains. So I have almost this adverse reaction to something that she might have experienced, but I know that it's there from her. So it's important for me to have those acknowledgments. And the pieces that I made for Columbia and Baldwin for the Arts, they were an investigation of like tangible items that I thought my family thought was something worth having. I've always grown up with doilies in my family's houses. I've always grown up with them knitting. I've always grown up with my father used to sew, my grandmother sewed. So I always grew up with those things in the background. But when I was creating those works, I was investigating, wow, you're leaving your home to go somewhere you don't know, but you brought a doily. And so in this very tragic and like harsh moment, you had the most delicate thing you could have. And you left your home to come here, but you always look sharp. And so sewing and being able to put it on and look your best has always been something culturally instilled in me. And so it was important to activate those
epigenetic memories.
Memories in my work. The work is framed, but initially it wasn't because it's very textile based and I wanted people to be able to get up on it and look, the framing is beautiful. But a lot of the work that I'm doing I'm investigating the way in which I hang it because I think the frame does create a barrier, and I want you to see that it's an actual fabric pattern.
Yeah.
I want you to see that it's a doily, and I want you to imagine somebody was probably making that doily or folded it up. But when I go into my family's house outside of like strawberry candies, peppermints, and Werther's, there's always doilies, and there's a lot of people don't even know that's what it's called. And to think that these little nuances that are so delicate and we like just fold up and wash were brought along the way speaks like volumes to me, because I don't know if I'd be grabbing that on my way out.
Right.
I would grab a pencil and paper, so that's a very delicate thing. But, you know, and there are things that I've seen in all of my family, much like cards.
Right.
That was some, you know, like why do we need to bring these games with us? Why do we need to, why was that important? And so those are things that are seen specifically
I dig that.
in those pieces.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shawn.
I think there's something really special about what you said that really connects to collage in general. This work that we're doing is really all about what we decide to keep and what we decide to let go.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
It's really inventorying and prioritizing what's most important and putting it down to preserve. And that's what becomes this archive that we look back on as,
Right.
hey, this was what was important to him or her or them. It's just about, you know, prioritizing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people have, you know, that's a struggle for everybody to figure out, hey, what's important to me? What do I actually need to keep and what can I
Yes.
get rid of?
Yeah.
And collage makes it easy to visualize that and put it in a place where you can know what is and what isn't. So,
Absolutely. Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you both for being here. Thank you to the Athenaeum for having us. I think we're good.
Thank you. Good job.
I think we're good on time. Are we good on time?
You can take it, if there's any more questions, you have about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
if you want.
Go ahead. I was pointing at her. You're right.
Yannick, since you were like classically trained as a sculpture artist, I kind of just like want to know more about your transition into collage, since it's a lot more informal. What that like differences you noticed as an individual and just like I guess the culture around it as well.
Yeah, it's funny, collage, I mean, I've always done collage as almost like a sketch for a sculpture. So initially I would build like things out of paper. You know, that would be the first kind of structural idea for me to understand how I could build this thing. So it really wasn't until, it was late, maybe like 2018, when I started thinking about these two-dimensional kind of scenes that I would want to create. But even then, I was thinking more about them like backdrops or like window displays. I was a window display artist for this terrible place called Urban Outfitters. We would build these like incredible things. I mean, it was fun, you know, just kind of having that freedom to implement an entire vision, a whole world. But it was that kind of idea that, hey, I can maybe do this on a smaller scale. I can do this at home. I don't have to have a mandated kind of list to make this kind of scene happen. So it's interesting how collage has become like the bulk of the work that I do, because it never was the intention. And even still, the works that I do are still thought of as just blueprints, you know, for me to expand on, for me to, I don't know, blow up into cyanotypes or into an installation. They're rarely thought about for me as like the final thing. They're just a place to kind of jump from and expand from. And there's so much that goes into it that there's so much to pull from it, you know, at least for me. And I'm happy that it's become the primary focus of the work, because it leaves a history of, you know, where I've come from and how I can kind of keep pushing it. And I hope to really expand past that. I hope to be seen as more of like a, I don't know. I mean, I don't even want to claim it yet, but I'm hoping that I'm not only considered a collage artist, you know, by the time I'm out of here, because there's a lot to do. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Have any of you seen your work referenced in another work, another collage? Like, was it printed in a pamphlet or an art book, and then you see someone else and they...
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does that feel like? What is that?
Yeah.
In one way, you're like, wow, that's cool. Then another way, it's like, But I'll be honest, I have seen some of my photography make its way into collage. I appreciate that more than the painter that will paint my photo. You know, because that seems to be for a while it was like the #1 request. Hey, I love this photo, can I paint it? To which then I would say, I love your painting, can I take a photo of it and sell a print?
Right.
You know, we're in the same leagues. We can use each other's as source material or as a jumping off point, but you know, some of it's a bit aggressive. And I'm of the mindset of you have to fight for what it is that you're doing because you are leaving it to your children or your family, and then when it becomes diluted through, you know, these these derivative works, you're leaving a lot on the table. Yeah. And you know, I'm serious about my business in that regard. I don't like to leave anything on the table, and I also don't want to take anything from my children's table. So I fight for that. Yeah.
I've seen one of my cuttings, or something that I'm speculating is my cuttings in a mural recently, and I didn't say anything because sometimes for me saying nothing is the best thing I can do, knowing myself. And I chalked it up to, well, this is another black woman, a cutting of an ear, bless you, and a gold hoop is very specific to our culture. So I'm going to say that we both saw the same thing because of who we are. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But the way in which it was so exact was immediately very upsetting. And yes, I do create works that are of found and donated images, but it was very different because if someone would have called me, given my experience and given the fellowship I was in, I could have did that mural using my own piece with my own cutting. That was not just a cutting, it was a self-portrait that was risograph printed, then cut, then made in a very intentional light to highlight mental health and how what we hear and tell ourselves affects our health. So because it's only speculation, I shouldn't speak to it. Yeah. If I can confirm, I will, but because it's speculation, I just, you know, it's lingering. One day, maybe. John?
That piece that you showed, I've never seen that before.
Which one, this one?
Yes, that's off the chart.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. From you, I need that. Thank you.
That is an installation piece. That's how I see it.
Right.
Because it's coming from it kind of reminds you of a set design, but it's not.
Yeah.
That's an installation piece. I can see that in a room with two people with all the items in there.
Yeah.
Large, really large. Like someone walked into a room and those two figures were there. That's the way I see it.
You know, I love borrowing from your vision. You know that.
If that's the direction that you're going, I mean, like.
That's where I'm at, man. Yeah.
It does. You know what I mean?
Well, thank you for inspiring me, though.
John.
You know, I want everybody to know. Thank you for inspiring me. Yeah. You know. You know.
Okay, we have one more question, yes.
I think you were the only one so far in the symposium to mention risograph printing. I'm just curious how that entered into your practice.
Oh my goodness.
How it is
I'm gonna make it so, I usually do long story medium, but I'm really gonna do a long story short. I started out creating work, photo documenting my father in hospice. It's just a very boring space to be in while you're waiting. And he was like, I mean, do what you want to do. But I was using Polaroid camera and the shutter was waking him up, so I moved to my phone. When he passed, I had like all of these photographs, and just like I was recording the machines, I was recording his little movements in his sleep. I was just recording everything, my kids playing puzzles on the floor. So when he passed, I had all these images. And where I'm from in Newark, New Jersey, there was the Newark print shop, and you could go on Wednesdays and you could print unlimited from 6 to 10 with $10. And you could do screen printing, letterpress, cyanotype depending on your access to the dark room, but you could also develop film. And they took me and all my images and they taught me cyanotype. And I went lunatic crazy with cyanotype. I was cyanotyping clothes. It was like a whole thing. But the cyanotype made the images of my father more palatable for other people because they can be a little morbid when you're looking at the progression of someone dying. And so I introduced the blue because I was like, okay, this softens this up for other people, which is something I'm still working through. But through screen printing, it's a very messy process. I didn't always have access to the print shop, but I just like stumbled on someone teaching me risograph. I had an opportunity to print a book in a collective I was in Newark, the Land Collective. And I started to see risograph printing as just screen printing on a Xerox and less messy. And then someone gave me a risograph machine, which is like never heard of. I tried to buy it off of them, they said no. And then eventually they had a dream that told them Jillian should have this. And I was like, girl, listen to your dream, because it's my dream too. And so then I started to really investigate, like publication is a really big deal for me. I'm very interested in archiving through that way. But it allowed me to work through certain things that are a big deal, like registration. And it allowed me to work through separating images and bringing them back together and working through just like how I bring them back together using what colors. And it's as gratifying as screen printing, but everything is so instant. And so it's a nice fallback for me, but I do miss the process of screen printing, messing it up, like starting the screen all the way over and getting back to it. In the risograph, you are literally burning a screen. You're just doing it in a more clean way. And so I haven't brought my machine here from Jersey, but I'm hoping to bring it in the next few months because I really like teaching collage and printing on the risograph because there's so much that you can do there. And with the series that I was referencing, it was a matter of like, how can I print a bunch of things to be able to have something to cut to make a collage later? And I just started doing, certain things that were important to me, like that I always have on hoops, that I had Bantu knots, which was like very important. So I just ended up with stacks of paper, and then in my free time, I would just start like cutting them out. So the risograph is still it's there, it's highly influenced in my practice. Just access to it is very hard. People aren't really, I don't let people just use my machine. They're expensive and they become like your babies and like they're very temperamental. You have to speak to them nice all the time. But I am absolutely interested in like investigating my daughter's photographs through cyanotype and just how I can work on like publication projects and then collaging them within like full spread. So yeah, thank you for that question. All right, so thank you everyone. Thank you for your questions, thank you for your time. Thank you, Yannick, thank you, Shawn.
That's good, man. Can't keep it going,
I've been looking forward to this one since we had that Zoom conversation a couple months ago. This is wonderful, thank you. We have, take a 10-minute stretch. I know this is like the worst part of the day after you've had lunch and everybody just like trying to keep your eyes open because you don't want to miss a moment. So just take a 10-minute stretch and we are gonna have our closing conversation starting at 3:15.